You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
All right, it's the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, and I'm joined today by Larry Blustein. So it's Blu Mondays, Larry. So we will talk a little Hurricanes football and talk a bit about Mario Cristobal and kind of what he's done in the transfer portal and what he could potentially do with recruiting for this 2024 class. And uh, this is an interesting month. Of course, it's become a really huge recruiting month. June has been, and Miami's done well so far as getting players from the transfer portal and building that 2024 class. Now, Larry, we've talked before, and we've talked about depth concerns on this team, especially at some position groups, particularly linebacker, running back, defensive back. With all the additions that they've added within the past couple of weeks to a month, you've got players like Dalen Russell added to the recruiting class. Also, Cameron Pruitt, a linebacker, added him to the recruiting class as well. But they did add a player via the transfer portal in KJ Cloyd at linebacker. So overall, Blue, what do you think about Miami's additions, and do they address the depth concerns on this team?
You know, Marcus, you take a look at many times this, spring and into this early summer, I've had the opportunity to kind of talk to a couple of the coaches, and somebody that we banter back and forth is, about the roster is Coach Mirabal. And he and I look at it, and I said, you know what, this is June 15th of 2023. Look back at June 15th of 2022. It's a completely different roster. I mean, you've lost 36 kids. You've added 31, I believe, total, or 28, I believe, total. Plus, as you mentioned, in the recruiting class for 2024. So the roster is completely different. I mean, now you had no offensive line depth last year. You do now. At the linebacker position, as you mentioned, with the addition of Cloyd. And I think last time you and I got together, I kind of said, you could already see the difference at the linebacker position, because the last 2 years, Corey Flagg was starting. And now he's kind of a reserve or somebody off the bench, with Francisco Malagoa and obviously Wesley Bissaint, moving into perhaps a starting role. So you look at different positions, the defensive secondary with the transfer of Brown, with the emergence of, of Darryl Porter Jr. You look at the running back room, which is just going to get crazier and crazier because of the talent they have. Obviously, wide receiver still a question. I mean, you have talent there, but I still think it's unproven talent, especially at the outside for depth wise. I mean, but you look at the roster now, Marcus, as opposed to last year, completely different. So when somebody says to me, what do you think about this year? How many wins do you think? I don't even know, because you don't know how all these new faces are going to fit in and play together. You have all these, like you mentioned, with Cloyd and a couple of other kids who come in the transfer portal. These guys are already difference makers because of the fact that, look at their age. Look at look at Cohen. Look at Lee. Guys like that who are already established players. So that kind of infuses your roster right away. So to answer your question, I just think that there have been so many positive changes, and we knew it's going to be like that, because after last year and finishing 5-7, there was no way Mario Cristobal was going to sit pat with that roster. There's just no way you couldn't, because that wasn't a roster that probably would, that may get you 6 wins, but is it going to get you, an opportunity to win the ACC or be in the ACC hunt? Probably not. So I looked at the roster now, and you say to yourself, wow, they've got an opportunity to really, with their schedule, the way it's set up, and, a couple of things here and there. But that's what I'm saying. They've added so many experienced pieces. You don't know what's going to happen. But the one thing I do know, there's a lot more depth this time around.
Yeah, absolutely. When you see players like Keontre Smith and Corey Flagg, as far as depth pieces and not potential starters, then you're in a great place, especially at the linebacker position. But you did mention wide receiver as well. They did add a Shamar Kirk out of the JUCO ranks, and they also added Harrell as well, a speedster from
Right.
So they got a couple of receivers, but to your point, I would have liked to probably see a bigger receiver, like a more of an outside type of receiver, to add some of that, to some of that depth.
Right.
But still, they
no,
did a
I
great
agree
job.
with you. I agree with you. But at least you come in with Kobe Young. At least you come in with Isaiah Horton, who I think is a fast rising star, and Frank Latson Jr. still hanging out. So as far as that position, you've got the players, but you need the production.
Yeah, and another area I think they really addressed was defensive back. Defensive back, they definitely addressed, bringing in Jadais Richard, bringing in Jaden Davis as well.
Right.
You had so much depth that you had a transfer that came in, go out in Terry Roberts. So that's
and Devontae
definitely
Brown too.
Absolutely, and Devontae Brown is there as well. Still got some young guys developing, and then of course you mentioned Daryl Porter is there on the other side with, of course, a couple of young guys coming in and recruiting that haven't really fully hit green tree in camp yet. Robert Stafford and Damari Brown. So I think they addressed the depth concerns. They're going to continue to do that. But as far as players that kind of take the next step this season, you kind of want to see players develop into not just good players, but great players. And there's a couple of good players on this roster that you would want to see kind of take the next step in their development here in 2023. What are some of those players for you, Blue?
Well, I like Arnez Cooper. He's going to get an opportunity to play a little bit on the line. So he's going to have an opportunity to show what he's about. Najee Kelly, who is a guy who you and I watched at Dillard. Certainly somebody that is, being a sophomore and being young enough that he has an opportunity to establish himself this year. I still like Cyrus Moss. Even though he's thinner, you look in the spring and he made plays, and somebody like that, Ahmad Moten, because he has that size up front, he could be a space eater, a kid that has an opportunity to be really, really special. On the offensive side of the ball, I'm still waiting. I think the guy is going to emerge as Isaiah Horton. I really like him. He's a hard worker. He catches the ball really well. I think given an opportunity, he's going to be one of those guys that has a chance to really elevate his play this year. Being a redshirt freshman, Miami's always looking for that type of athlete. And probably if I looked at another guy and to maybe be a surprise, I think Jaleel Skinner's got an opportunity because right now I don't think that's the deepest tight end room. It's got possibilities, but you've got Cam McCormick, who's older, obviously, and then you have Elijah Arroyo, who's coming off an injury filled year. So I think somebody like that could help. We already know the running game. Who else? Nobody's gonna no one's gonna step up that we don't know about. Yeah, Fletcher and Chris Johnson, could emerge, but you still have a lot of guys left over, from last year. And then you got those young kids like Bobby Washington and Ray Ray. But to answer your question, I think those guys that I mentioned have an opportunity to elevate their game and go to the next level. So we're sitting here next year talking about those guys as being, difference makers rather than projections.
Jaleel Skinner was actually a player that I was going to mention that should definitely take the next step. But Elijah Arroyo is another one for me. I really kind of want to see him take the next step. Yeah, he's coming off an injury once again, but you definitely want to see the flashes that you saw really early in the season and the season prior from him.
Right.
I think he's a really dynamic player, can catch the ball really well. So I want to see him take the next step. And another player for me is Jafari Harvey. This is a guy who will probably, if not start, he's definitely going to be in the rotation with, a Nigel Lee Kelly.
Yeah.
On the other side. So we didn't see him in the spring, was injured. So kind of want to see him develop. He's been here for a while now out of Vero Beach, and you kind of want to see him develop and kind of take that next step. And so I'm excited to see what he does. And another player that I do kind of want to zero in on is James Williams. So James Williams has a real opportunity to really show what he can do, really show that 5-star rating that was flashing in high school. And he's playing alongside an All-American now in Cameron Kinchin. So he's going to have his opportunities to definitely shine here. Do you think he takes that next step from good to great?
He's got a good opportunity. And like you said, playing around Cam Kinchin's, he's got a lot of the heat taken off of him because you have a guy, as you mentioned, an All-American, a playmaker like Cam. James got the athletic ability. It's just the putting him in the right position. I always felt, and I've said from day one, I would put him not down, but I would put him in an outside linebacker position because he could drop into coverage and use his skills. But at the same time, he's a big guy, 6'5", and he covers a lot of ground. So but Miami's going to obviously see what they have. He's, like you said, he's been dinged up as well, and that was the theme of the spring. Even though they wanted to get a look at a lot of guys, you were at the spring game, you saw a lot of guys didn't play, and that wasn't that's what you really need the spring for, is to evaluate. And even Cohen went out after a couple of plays, even though you kind of know what he's going to do. But no, I agree with you. I think James Williams, this is his year to live up to all the hype.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for him. I'm excited for him to really kind of step into what we've expected from James. So I think with this new defensive coordinator who is really focused on the defensive backs, is really going to develop him to the next level in Lance Guidry. I really think he is going to take it to the next level. So I'm excited to see his development.
Now, coaching makes a difference, and you could already see it, with the coordinators, like you mentioned, Guidry, the kids respond to him, the recruits like him, he's all in, and I think that's really important. And and I've said millions of times, I just didn't think that the coaching staff was all in last year. I just think that they came here, collected a paycheck, and that was it. But that's not the case now, because you look and, just going there the other day and watching the one of the camps that they have. You look at guys like Tim Harris, and you look at some of the new coaches that have Jason Taylor, obviously. They work their butts off, and you look at a Jason Taylor, Marcus, and you say to yourself, this guy don't need to be working this job. He's set for life. He's from a standpoint, he's a Hall of Famer, but that's not him. In his fiber, he wants to elevate, and he has. And he's shown in the past that when he's around people, he could really make a difference. He's done it in like 2-3 players over the last 4 or 5 years that he's worked with them a little bit. And look at Dallas Turner. Obviously he's going to be a huge draft pick for the Alabama, and started the last couple of years. So he's a guy that came over his last year from American Heritage and learned a great deal. From somebody like a Jason Taylor. So I think you have a coaching staff now that really has helping to elevate the talent, and that's what Mario Cristobal talked about last year. We can't do this by ourselves. We got to have other like-minded coaches on the staff.
Yeah, you make a great point about this coaching staff being all in, because I sense that as well. These are a bunch of guys that are kind of casually, I guess, unknown. Only like real football aficionados would have known these names prior to coming to Miami. But with the previous staff, you kind of knew. I think most people kind of knew who Kevin Steele was. Most people kind of knew who Charlie Strong was. So I think,
and even Gaddis from the year before when he was at Michigan, where he was like the assistant coach of the year.
Right, exactly. Recruiter of the year. So I think these guys are really trying to make a name for themselves, and you can kind of sense that, and you also sense from Jason Taylor in particularly that although he's got all of these accolades throughout his career, defensive player of the year, multiple Pro Bowler, and there's a sense of humility though with him that you can sense that although he has all these accomplishments, this is his first college job.
Yeah.
Legit. So he's treating it that way, and he is going to develop into, I think, one of the better coaches in all of college football.
Yeah.
I mean, just from the feedback from the kids, some of them don't even know like his history, and
most of them don't.
Yeah, they don't. I talked to the one kid from New Orleans who got the offer, and he was like, "Yeah, I didn't even know he was a Hall of Famer," but he said he loved his coaching. He actually said that before I mentioned that he was a Hall of Famer, that he loves his coaching and he loves the way that he coached him during that camp.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely excited for this coaching staff and really developing these players from good to great. I really feel like that will happen this season. But Blue, you've been around, pretty much across the state to different camps, and you've been out to Florida, right, and Florida State, and a bunch of different colleges.
Be back at Florida tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
So UCF on Saturday. So I'm
wow.
I've got and even Miami and FAU and FIU. I mean, the camp season is just really great.
Yeah. So tell me what you've seen out there as far as some players out there that kind of really stood out to you that may be good fits for the University of Miami.
Well, I can start off by saying over the weekend on Saturday at FSU, FSU offered a kid by the name of Grant Wise. He's a 2026 offensive lineman from Pace High School in the Panhandle. Well, he's a Miami legacy. His dad started for Miami for 2 years, Ty Wise at center, and they will be down for the.
That was great.
Yeah. And they will be down for the Legends Camp this week, and it's his first visit to Miami, because obviously when you live in the Panhandle, it's like 600 miles away, so it's not something that you could do. And I'm kind of close to Ty Wise, and I've stayed close to him throughout the years, and I'll tell you what, Miami needs to offer, and Miami needs to put the pressure, because this is the type of kid that takes you to the next level. 6'5", 290 as a freshman. State rated as a weightlifter, 3.6 GPA. I mean, guys like that, and the same thing, when I was up at the Florida camp. The one thing that Florida and Florida State may have the edge in is their proximity to Louisiana, to Alabama, to Georgia. See, Miami doesn't have that. It takes you 7 hours to get out of the state, so that's why Miami's done well with the Mario Cristobals, and who have national and now your coordinators who have regional and national experience, and that helps Miami in a great deal. And you look at last week when we were seeing they had the 4 or 5 kids that came from the state of Washington.
Right.
And we were watching them last year. If you could get those type of kids to come 3,400 or 3,300 miles across the country just for a camp and for a visit, I think that it bodes well. Miami's reputation, and that's the one thing people have a hard time, and I know especially Hurricane fans, but in Des Moines, Iowa, Miami's still a 5-7 team that didn't go to a bowl game last year. See,
right.
We are more privy to what's going on the inside because we're here, and we see how many changes they've made. But in Minnesota, they have no clue. They just look it up and they go, oh, geez, they were 5-7. They lost to Middle Tennessee State. So that's what makes all of this, the transfer portal studs, getting guys like, 4 and 5 star type of players, Elijah Lofton from Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas, guys like that who are national recruits. That makes it more exciting and head shaking to say, how the hell are they getting these kids? But that's something that people have to realize, that when you have people who, as you mentioned, who have a passion for this game, to me, where Jason Taylor may not mean anything going into a living room for a 17-year-old kid, his parents are starstruck.
Right.
And that helps. And he could go out, and he has been out. He goes, when I was upstate, last week in the Tallahassee area and talking to some of the, the kids, and they talk about, oh, well, geez, Coach Kevin Beard, he's great, man. He, this and that. Or Coach Harris, I remember when he was at UCF, and I was going to go there then. And remember, now it's not just the big 3, because UCF's in that mix now. They're a Power 5 school. So they, they just got this year, they got a commitment from the Stacey Gage, who obviously out of St. Thomas Aquinas. So that's another thing. You have to recruit, nonstop. And that's what he's done. And, going into the portal and getting these kids that he knew, because remember, a lot of these guys, this staff somewhere, not just Mario and guys that came from the West, but some of the coordinators or some of the other coaches probably recruited these guys out of high school. And then all of a sudden they say, wait a minute, they're in the portal? Oh, let's work hard to get them because I like that kid. This kid's this and that. And that's what happens. And that's where I think Miami's had a huge advantage and kind of gone past that 5-7. They've kind of closed that off. And I think what they've done is just an amazing job. And, as you mentioned, getting these kids who are plug and play kids, DBs, linebackers, that only enhances what Miami already had.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly the situation that happened with the linebacker KJ Cloyd. KJ Cloyd was coached up by Derek Nicholson, who was over there at Louisville. So he jumps in the portal. That relationship's obviously still there. So you're able to bring a kid like that who can potentially play a lot of downs for you. For the University of Miami. And
if he stayed at Louisville, Coach English runs the 5-2-4 off defense, so he really wouldn't, have played a lot. So this fits them a lot better.
That 5-2, huh? People still run that 5-2 defense
at Louisville. They do. They run that 5-2, and a kid who that came from here, Stanquan Clark is going to be one of those two linebackers. So it's,
Right.
yeah, you got to, nowadays, and it was funny that, no matter, it's not just Miami, but, USF, UCF, Florida, that you go, and there's so many on-staff people now because they have to have almost like, a guy just to watch the portal, or two people to watch the portal and see who's in it. It's not always an easy thing because kids go in there and there's a ton of them. But it's like a capologist in the NFL. You need one of those. And I think that having somebody like an Alonzo Highsmith, who has been there, done that as a as a talent evaluator, as somebody who manages rosters, I think you got to credit him as well to all the success.
Yeah, absolutely. He does a great job of evaluating talent for the University of Miami. Like you said, he's been doing it on several different levels. So to come back down to his alma mater to do it, it has only been, just beneficial for the University of Miami. Coach Cristobal, man, he does a great job at recruiting. Like, recruiting is his thing, right? He's done a good job over the past few years when it comes to recruiting. If you don't count last year and his transition year from offensive line coach to head coach at Oregon, he's 26-9, as a head coach. So I think that's more what you would need to kind of measure Cristobal on, rather than his overall 500 record. He's actually absolutely right on the dot with 567 and 67 as a head coach. But, you're counting some of those FIU years, which, Blue, were tough. It's tough for anyone to kind of bring that program up, and he did during that time.
Yeah.
But there were some rough years in the beginning, naturally, with that program, which kind of brought his overall record down. But of course, we can attribute that 26-9 record to recruiting, because every year at Oregon, he had a top 10 class.
Yeah.
He had a top 10 class, besides the two transition years, those years where he was, fully engulfed in recruiting for that school. He had top 10 classes every year. So last year, he has a top 10 class with Miami. So I'm expecting Cristobal to have another top 10 class in this 2024 class. And I think it's just going to snowball and continue here.
Yeah.
With, the next couple of years in recruiting, which ultimately will result in wins. What do you think?
I agree. The only thing is nowadays, and I've never believed in the star rating. I think it's production on the field that wins you games, not how many stars you have. And that's the only thing that could keep them, because they've got a lot of quote unquote 3 stars, instead of those 4 and 5 stars that Alabama and Ohio State have. That's the only thing that would probably keep them right a little bit out of the top 10, because they're going on those star rating. But as far as talent and productivity, you look at all those kids that they're bringing in, especially in the 2024 class. I mean, their production is crazy, and but that's the only thing, Marcus, that would keep them out of the top 10, is that crazy star rating that's made by people who, I mean, I could sit here until tomorrow and tell you my thoughts on that. From somebody like yourself and me, who are on those sidelines watching kids and not just sitting at home on our, watching videos and evaluating kids, we know there's so much more to the fact that you can catch the ball or make a tackle. What type of teammate are you? Are you willing, if your number's not called, are you going to go and sulk, or are you going to, you're going to be a receiver and is going to start blocking out of anger, because you didn't get your number called? See, there's a lot of things that go involved into the recruiting process. And that's why I say, there a lot of these schools. You look now, Texas A&M, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan. They all have a lot of 4 and 5 stars, and that's why they're in the top 6 or 7 teams. And with Miami, if that's what they're going to do, Miami will finish out of the top 10. But if they go beyond that and say, well, wait a minute, these 3 stars, these kids are productive kids. And I think that, by watching them, and that's the only thing, because, and Mario is not a star guy. You talk to him, he could care less because, I mean, he's seen too many 4 and 5 star kids flop and come in and not achieve what they needed to achieve. And, just because somebody from a Rivals or a 247 or whatever it may be these days on 3, deem these guys as 4 or 5 stars, doesn't mean they are. They have to still play the game. They still, and I think if you watch these kids like you and I, up close, you could tell, how's this kid a 3-star? Jesus. Yeah. I mean, he's fast. He makes tackles all over the field, or this kid could catch against anybody. He runs tremendous routes. And that's a thing. To me, you look at a lot of guys like Jose Leon. He just committed to Appalachian State. But you watch him, he's as productive as anybody on the field. And
absolutely.
That's, it goes back to the Zach Thomas thing. Yeah, Zach was 5'8" and 220 and running a 4.7. But geez, he's getting 150 tackles a year. So, that's, to me, if you base your recruiting on production and not what anybody else deems them to be, you'll be ahead of the game. And you look at Mario Cristobal. That's how he's been able to get the Penei Sewells and guys like that, because even Penei Sewell at the beginning wasn't the stud, that he turned out to be. And he just saw, it takes you back to, like you have coaches like Charlie Partridge from Pittsburgh that knew enough to come down to Miami and look at a Kalijah Cansey at 5'10" and say, you know what? Aaron Donald wasn't much bigger. So if this kid could play at a level, and look at him, he's a 1st-round draft pick. So that's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter the star rankings. It just matters how you recruit these kids and how you evaluate them. That really counts.
Absolutely. And Miami's had success with 3-star players in the past. I mean, David Njoku was a 3-star player. Ron Johnson was a 3-star player. Sheldrick Redwine. Rayshawn Jenkins.
Yeah. Their all-time leading rusher. Their all-time leading rusher was a 3-star coming out of Norland and Duke Johnson.
Yeah.
So
That'll
tell you.
Yeah. He started to get more stars, before he graduated from high school. But started out as a low-rated kid. So that's gonna change though, Blue. You know me. I'm here in Rivals. It's gonna take some time, but I have some influence on the star rating, but not it's not 100%, but it'll get a little better over time.
But you should, because from a South Florida perspective. You're in a vital area, so you should have more of an input. But that's that's something that is between you and Rivals. But I'm just saying that, I used to say that to Andrew Ivins too. I said, well, you see more of these kids. How are you going to let some guy in Nashville tell you who, a guy that you're seeing right, from 5 feet away is not really, really good? That sometimes it confuses me too. When somebody from across the country is telling me about a kid that I'm 4 feet away from, every weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And as we've seen in the past week, of Vincent Shavers, who's committed to the Miami Hurricanes, was a 3-star when he committed, is now a 4-star talent. So they start to see a little bit more of what the talent really is, once they commit to a major school, because I think they take in more so the coaching evaluations more so than, evaluators like you and I guess.
No, I agree.
Yeah. So I think Cristobal has done a great job and will continue to do so in recruiting. Already has a pretty good class with bunch of players likely to commit in the next couple of months.
Right.
We'll certainly see where they end up, but just the optics of landing 2 back-to-back classes in the top 10 bodes well for the future anyway. So we'll see exactly where they end up. Thanks, Blue, for joining me today. Just if you could just tell the audience where they can find a little bit more of your stuff.
Well, we're on every Monday night on WQAM, and you're a guest quite frequently with us, and I thank you for that. Yeah, we had to kind of dance around the Heat and the Panthers because obviously they had success. So we return with our Monday night show, 6 to 8, have college coaches on, have local kids, kids who have committed, not just to Miami, but, everywhere. And then we do our Prep Red Zone, which is the state of Florida, PrepRedZoneFlorida.com. And then if you're interested in Miami-Dade and Broward recruiting, I have a website that we keep flowing, LarryBlustein.com. And the thing that's good there is you have a complete database. So we have almost 1,900 kids from Dade and Broward that are listed by position. And we have that ongoing transfer deal now, which is now at 152. And wow. It's crazy. And we, a lot of, like, Frank keeps the elite kids. We keep everybody because of the fact that colleges need to know where these kids are at. And a lot of these guys, when we go through the rosters and, get their prospect sheets, you go into your database and you go, well, wait a minute, this kid was at this school last year. So that's how you find out a lot, because there's a lot of coaches that won't tell you. They just don't. And a lot of them don't like, that 15 minutes of fame that a lot of these kids are getting, because you get those big edits with your color picture and saying you're going here to that. Kids eat that up. College, high school coaches don't, but the kids do.
Yeah. I still feel like it's an obligation for me to put kids out as well, although I'm focused on the Hurricanes. Just like the last camp that I went to, I listed kids that, I feel were, that stood out to me, because I feel like it's an obligation for me to really just kind of put these kids out there because I'm there and I have the platform. They deserve a limelight, just like you have been doing for many years. And, of course, everyone thanks you for all the work that you do. And thank you for joining me on this podcast again this morning. Once again, this is CanesCounty.com, a part of the Rivals.com network. Go to our website to subscribe for free. You see that promo code down there. Use that promo code Miami30 for the first 30 days for free. And that's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast.